Alright, I want this to be a quick video, just kind of go over one specific topic that bugs me, that it's not like a super end-all be-all, like huge emotional argument or anything like that, but it is something that I see enough, is misuse of the word balance when it comes to game development, gameplay. And here's and in fact the only reason why I'm bothering to make the video is because there's this excellent interview with Thorn and Thresh. Thresh is one of the original uh, pro. I think he is actually the original pro competitive uh, arena FPS player in gaming in esports. Period. He's like the first guy who applied any kind of strategy to um, games like Doom and Quake. And this is going way back a long time ago. So there's this really amazingly talented uh, caster who puts up videos called Thorn's Thoughts, and he's excellent, and you probably know about him before you would ever know about me. Anyway, uh, take a there's this one part of this really fucking phenomenal interview where he interviews Thresh. Take a look at this.
I personally think that's that tension that you get from the ebb and flow of control and fighting over control is actually what made the Quake kind of games really fun. It's not fun to just be able to just keep dying or die, you just take turns killing each other. That's not, I don't know, to me that's not what makes the game fun.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the problem in Quake 3 obviously was they made that starting weapon, the machine gun, powerful enough where say we have an even fight and I win by 10 health. If you spawn next to me, I'm dead. Like
yeah,
I don't get
yeah.
the advantage for winning in a way.
Exactly, that's which I really don't like, right? But I remember, like he said to me after I won the Quake that Ferrari tournament, I won 13 to -1, and that like really troubled him because
Okay.
I think I remember I locked down the map like almost instantly, and it became kind of boring to watch because there's literally nothing the guy could do. And I think that really bothered him, and so he set out to change it. So he made Quake 2 a little bit more balanced, and then Quake 3 even more balanced.
Do you think we'll ever see like a Quake? I mean, here's the problem. Okay, I'll put this context in. If you ever read about the history of development of Quake and Doom, etc., they did add in the multiplayer aspects, but they were essentially developed as single player games, and then some of it's just happenstance how great some of the multiplayer features were. Like it's actually what made them so good in Quake, for example, is that the weapons are totally unbalanced. Because it was here's the genius thing, because it's built on a single player game, you're not supposed to have the rocket launcher when you start the game. You build up to that, So in a weird way, the single player aspect made the multiplayer kind of genius in terms of how OP some of the guns were. Whereas later versions, they tried to make a lot of the weapons more balanced, and depending on what situation, one was better. Will we ever see a super hardcore Quake 1 type game again, do you think, in esports?
I wouldn't be surprised if it came back. I mean, Dirty Bomb's kind of in that same vein now.
Okay, so what the basic misconception is and how it's being misused, and it's difficult to sit here and want to correct these two people who are obviously know what they're talking about. Uh, the basic premise is that asymmetrical does not equal unbalanced, and the term and balance in game design is actually a very complicated topic. You can argue that Quake 1 was more uneven. You can't argue that Quake 1 was less balanced. You can argue that Quake 2 was more even than Quake 1. You can't say Quake 2 was an unbalanced game. It was more balanced than Quake 1. They were. It's actually two different topics. Quake 3 is more even than Quake 2, but that doesn't make it more balanced than Quake 2. So you see what I'm saying here is that asymmetry and balance are not connected. They're not the same thing. You can't come out and say as a game developer, "Oh, I'm going to use the magic formula and just make all the guns exactly the same strength." The mistake that the Thorn and Thresh made was really innocuous. It was not something to, but it's something that I did see, and it's something that actually I do see fairly often as just a regular misconception. Just talking about arena first person shooters in general. Um, but what gets me is that once you give this, once it's kind of like a slippery slope. Once you give rise to the argument that Quake One was totally more, was way less balanced than Quake Three, you're you're s- you're going to give rise to the idea that, well, people who like Quake One are going to now be able to say, I prefer unbalanced gameplay, and shit and logic just completely leaves. Okay, so this was in the context of a really long time ago. This is when Doom 4 was first being shown in E3. And this, I don't even know how to remember this, but it ends up actually being something that kind of sticks in the back of my mind because every once in a while I'll see this crop up. If it's unbalanced, we can then balance it. Somebody's making an argument that, well, if the game sucks and we have the modding tools, we can take unbalanced weapons and balance them, which just usually just in terms of game development means we're going to make it improve how the game plays. We're going to refine the gameplay so that there are more valid options, so that uh, everything, so that it makes sense within its own context. Having a weapon that is stronger in Quake 1 was that style of play, and having weapons that were more evenly matched, having weapons that were more evenly matched, was how Quake 3 was meant to play, where the it was harder to kill each other. So, for example, reading this, it goes, perfect balance, whether it's weapons or symmetry or symmetric maps, tends to be boring. Sure, you might make the argument that having levels that are that aren't the same on either side is more interesting. However, in terms of balance, symmetry is a different topic. The asymmetric. Can you imagine if a game developer actually said, you know what, the secret magic cure to having a game that's super balanced is just to make every gun exactly the same? Oh, sure, yeah, that's. But actually, in turn, certain guns take uh 10 steps to get to. Certain guns, one gun you have to go all the way out into a big open area and get it. But they're all doing the same damage. Keep in mind, they're all equal. All of the weapons are equal. One of them's out in an open field, leaving you totally vulnerable. One of them's 1 foot away, and you can grab that one. It's practically in the same room that you spawn in. Now, there's another one that's over here. It's up the stairs, and it's by this mega health, right? There are countless examples I can give you right now where simply making all of the guns equal actually results in unbalanced gameplay. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people, and then it kind of goes even further. Look, totally agreed. Too much balance makes things uninteresting. It's like two different wavelengths kind of just missing each other. Okay, so to add on to that, here's an example where having weapon distribution strengths, a tier progression like Quake 1 can result in more balanced gameplay. So in the case of team versus team, it takes a little bit more skill and coordination between your teammates in a tiered weapon progression where the weapons are purposely balanced to be uneven. Oh man, it sounds like I'm making the same mistake, but that's how the weapons were balanced for that particular within that context. They were to be tiered. All right, Quake is a balanced game, especially in team versus team. So now when somebody dies and they had a rocket launcher, it's a bigger loss and it requires more teamwork to re-gear that guy. Whereas in an example like Quake 3, team versus team, all of the guns being more equal actually results in more unbalanced gameplay because it doesn't matter that that person died as much. So there's less requirements. It is actually really complicated, and it's very easy to misunderstand exactly what's being talked about here. And one of the other things that's typically misunderstood is like, well, I was only talking about balance in terms of a very specific facet of the game. But if you ever talk to game developers, we'll always say, well, we did a balance pass on the weapons, but we have absolutely no idea how balanced they are. So we're thinking clearly in terms of like the quality of play. We're not talking about how they're tiered or anything like that. We're more concerned with, holy shit, I hope nothing's imbalanced or imba, which is the term imba. We're just hoping that there's not going to be some imba combination that's going to fuck the game, and people are going to all have to use that one gun, which does not give rise to interesting gameplay where people have to come up with interesting ways to have advantages over each other because now everybody's just using that one fucking gun because we fucked up with the balance. You understand? So you can't just think about balance when you use the term balance. You can't just say like about one aspect, about one thing, and you should never ever make the argument that you prefer unbalanced gameplay because that means you don't know what the term actually means to everybody. Now, uh, it bugs me. It's sort of like using the word ironic incorrectly. Sure, whatever. I got what you meant. I know what you're saying, but you are using it incorrectly when you say too much balance leads to uninteresting gameplay. It means that you've just completely lost the point. Balance should always lead to better, more interesting gameplay. Otherwise, it's not balanced. Otherwise, it's poorly balanced. Otherwise, it's crap. No game developer, no game developer ever said, "Man, I stayed up super late last night unbalancing the guns. Man, I really hope that the guns are nice and unbalanced for next playtest." Never fucking happened unless it was an accident. Okay? I'm guaranteeing you. Nobody who actually puts these things together actually uses the term that way. They never say, "Man, I really hope I unbalanced these guns." What the hell do you think people were thinking when they were making Quake 1? It was like, "Man, I really hope we can unbalance these guns. Man, we really need to come up with interesting gameplay where people come up with interesting ways." It's not even interesting. If one gun is always better than the other, it's not. It tends to actually detract unless there's a really strong meta behind uh, always making sure that that player is denied the weapon, or that the gaining that weapon requires skill, or that it's an even matchup. Sometimes there's two rocket launchers in a single map. But you can't say that Quake 1 is a more balanced game than Quake 3. That's not how it is. It's just not, and you can't argue in favor of unbalanced. It just doesn't make any sense. To a game developer, if you say that to a game developer, he's going to look at you like, "You what? You want to make the game shit? You want to just totally break everything? Okay, sure." And you can even just let's make all of the guns in CS:GO equal in strength. Well, you're just looking at the one thing. Well, in terms of weapon balance, well, what the fuck information is that? That's not even useful. You can't use that to determine anything. So why even fucking say it? I was only talking about weapon balance, or I was only talking about, or I will, I only was specifically talking about the movement. I feel that the movement was really balanced, but all the guns are hit scan. You can't just look at it in one respect. If all the guns are hit scan and the characters are moving super slow and floaty in the fucking air, obviously it's going to result in some unbalanced gameplay, right? So the topic is really crazy because whenever you use the term balance, you have to be thinking in terms of the context of the game, and you have to be thinking in terms of just the entire thing, right? Because just because the guns are doing equal damage doesn't mean more balanced. Just because it's symmetrical doesn't mean, man, this is really balanced. And just because it's asymmetrical doesn't fucking make it more interesting. It may actually result in it being really shitty. So there you go. No magic formula. Okay, I'm done. I probably talked about this way too fucking long. Thank you for thank you for listening.